The antique grandfather clock in Thaddeus Mercer's office ticked relentlessly, each second punctuating the deafening silence that had fallen between him and his doctor. Thaddeus stared at the medical scans spread across his mahogany desk, the black and white images showing the ruthless spread of cancer through his liver. At 53, the self-made tech billionaire had conquered Silicon Valley, revolutionized quantum computing, and amassed a fortune that spanned continents. He had everything except time. 6 months, maybe 8 with aggressive treatment, Dr. Ashford said, her voice gentle but firm. I'm sorry, Thaddeus. We've exhausted all experimental protocols. Thaddeus nodded, his expression unchanged. His steel-gray eyes, known for piercing through business opponents, remained fixed on the horizon beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. The San Francisco skyline glittered in the evening light, a testament to human achievement that now seemed hollow. Thank you for coming personally, Eleanor, he said finally, his voice betraying no emotion. I appreciate your candor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thaddeus Mercer had built Quantum Nexus from a garage startup to a trillion-dollar empire through sheer determination and brilliant innovation. The headlines had always painted him as ruthless, calculating, and solitary. The Quantum King, they called him, a man who had sacrificed personal connections for the altar of success. His assistant, Zephyr, had managed his life with military precision for 15 years, keeping the world at bay while he built his kingdom. The morning after his diagnosis, Thaddeus sat alone in his modernist glass mansion perched on the cliffs of Cypress Point. The sprawling estate, worth over 40 million, had never felt more empty. His phone buzzed incessantly. Board members, executives, investment partners, all demanding pieces of a life that was rapidly slipping away. Sir, the board is requesting an emergency meeting regarding the Singapore merger, Zephyr said, entering his minimalist living room with a tablet in hand. Cancel it, Thaddeus replied, surprising even himself. Cancel. The meeting, sir? Zephyr asked, her composure slipping momentarily. All of it. Clear my calendar for the next week. Zephyr paused, studying the man she'd served meticulously for a decade and a half. Something had changed. In 15 years, Thaddeus Mercer had never taken a day off, let alone a week. Is everything all right, sir? No, Zephyr. Nothing is all right. He turned from the window, his usual intensity directed inward. I need you to contact my attorney immediately. The Crescent Moon Children's Home sat on 3 acres of land in the forgotten outskirts of Oak Ridge County. Once a grand estate, the century-old Victorian mansion had been converted to house-orphaned children 30 years ago. Its pale blue paint peeled at the edges, and the wraparound porch sagged slightly, but colorful handprints decorated the entrance, bringing life to the aging structure. Ren Calloway, the home's director for 25 years, watched with apprehension as the sleek black Tesla pulled up the gravel driveway. When the Mercer Foundation had contacted her about a personal visit from Thaddeus Mercer himself, she'd been skeptical. Billionaires didn't visit places like Crescent Moon unless there were cameras to capture their charity. Remember your manners, she reminded the small group of children assembled on the porch. Mr. Mercer's foundation has been very generous. The Tesla's door opened and Thaddeus emerged, dressed not in his usual tailored suit, but in simple slacks and a cashmere sweater. His salt and pepper hair caught the autumn sunlight as he surveyed the property with unreadable eyes. Mr. Mercer, Ren approached, extending her hand. Welcome to Crescent Moon. I'm Ren Calloway. Ms. Calloway, he acknowledged, his handshake, firm but brief. Thank you for accommodating my unexpected visit. Your foundation's donations built our new education wing, she replied, gesturing to the recently constructed extension. We should be thanking you. Thaddeus nodded absently, his attention drawn to the children watching him with undisguised curiosity. 5 in particular stood slightly apart from the others, 2 identical twin boys around 12, and 3 younger children who seemed to orbit around them. "Those are the Nightingale siblings," Wren explained, following his gaze. "Ilawan and Everett are the twins. The younger ones are Caspian, Lyra, and Fable. They arrived 6 months ago after losing both parents in an accident." Something shifted in Thaddeus's expression, so subtle that Wren almost missed it. "No other family. None willing to take all 5, she said quietly. "We try to keep siblings together, but—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew the reality of the system. "May I meet them?" Thaddeus asked, surprising Wren with his interest. The interaction was awkward at first. Thaddeus Mercer, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and intimidating competitors, found himself uncharacteristically tentative before these 5 children. Ilawan, the elder twin by 7 minutes, observed him with analytical eyes that seemed to see right through his carefully constructed facade. Everett, more outgoing but equally perceptive, asked pointed questions about Thaddeus's electric car. 9-year-old Caspian demonstrated a self-designed computer game on the home's ancient desktop. 7-year-old Lyra recited facts about quantum physics that she'd memorized from a library book, while 5-year-old Fable simply offered Thaddeus her favorite stuffed fox to hold. "It's missing an eye," she explained solemnly, "but that just makes him special." Thaddeus found himself unexpectedly moved by the gesture, carefully accepting the worn toy as though it were made of precious materials. As his visit extended, from the planned 30 minutes to over 3 hours, Wren watched with growing astonishment. The children had somehow managed to coax the billionaire into helping with a science project, listening to Lyra's off-key singing and examining Everett's collection of mechanical puzzles. When Thaddeus finally prepared to leave, Ilawan approached him directly. "You're sick, aren't you?" she asked quietly, out of earshot of the others. Thaddeus froze, his hand halfway to the car door. "What makes you say that?" The girl shrugged, her intelligent eyes never leaving his face. "Your hands tremble sometimes, you're pale beneath your tan, and you look at everything like you're trying to memorize it." She paused. "My mom looked the same way before she died." For a moment, Thaddeus couldn't respond, struck by the child's perceptiveness. "Will you visit again?" she asked, her voice betraying no emotion, though something vulnerable flickered in her eyes. "I will," Thaddeus promised, surprising himself with how much he meant it. The next morning, Zephyr arrived at the glass mansion to find Thaddeus surrounded by documents, his normally pristine living space transformed into a makeshift office. Legal papers, property deeds, and financial portfolios covered every surface. "I need you to cancel my treatments," he said without preamble. "Your treatments?" Zephyr echoed, alarmed. "Sir, I don't understand. The experimental protocols, the appointments with Dr. Ashford, cancel them all. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Thaddeus," she said, using his first name for perhaps the first time in their professional relationship. "Is this about yesterday's visit to the children's home?" He looked up, his expression more animated than she'd seen in years. "I've spent my life accumulating wealth, Zephyr. For what? To die alone, surrounded by things instead of people." He gestured to the sprawling empty house. "I have no family, no children, no legacy beyond patents and profit margins. Sir, with respect, you're not thinking clearly. The diagnosis has given me clarity," he interrupted. "For the first time in decades, I can see exactly what matters." He handed her a folder. "These are new instructions for my legal team. I'm adopting the Nightingale children. Zephyr nearly dropped the folder. "All 5 of them, sir, that's exactly what I want," he finished firmly. "I have 6 months, maybe 8. I intend to use that time creating a family and ensuring those children never have to be separated." The process was far from simple. Despite Thaddeus's wealth and influence, the adoption system wasn't designed to place 5 siblings with a terminally ill single man. Thaddeus attacked the challenge with the same determination that had built his empire, hiring the country's top family law experts and personally meeting with social workers, judges, and child welfare officials. Ren Calloway became an unexpected ally, advocating for the unconventional arrangement after seeing how Thaddeus interacted with the children during his increasingly frequent visits. While his diagnosis raised obvious concerns, his meticulous preparations, a comprehensive trust for the children's care, education, and future, a carefully selected team of guardians to transition after his death, extensive home modifications to accommodate 5 children, gradually overcame the system's resistance. 3 months after his first visit to Crescent Moon, Thaddeus brought the Nightingale siblings to their new home. The cold glass mansion had been transformed. Each child had a room decorated to their specifications, Elowen's filled with books and a powerful telescope. Everett's designed as a young engineer's dream, with building tools and a workbench. Caspian's equipped with the latest technology. Lyra's painted with a cosmic mural of constellations, and Fable's transformed into a whimsical wonderland of imagination. The transition wasn't seamless. 12 years in the foster system had made the twins wary of attachment. Elowen in particular maintained a careful distance, watching Thaddeus with the same analytical gaze that had unsettled him during their first meeting. The younger children adapted more readily. Caspian and Lyra delighted in exploring the mansion's possibilities, while Fable attached herself to Thaddeus with surprising speed, often following him around with her one-eyed fox clutched tightly to her chest. Thaddeus found himself navigating a world completely foreign to him. School runs, balanced meals, bedtime routines, and emotional support replaced board meetings, acquisitions, and quarterly projections. His body grew weaker as the cancer progressed, but his spirit seemed to strengthen with each passing day. The board of Quantum Nexus watched with growing concern as their founder withdrew from daily operations. Rumors of his condition began to circulate through Silicon Valley, and the company's stock fluctuated wildly with each speculation. Vianne Chambers, Thaddeus's ambitious COO, moved quickly to fill the power vacuum, presenting herself to investors as the natural successor to the quantum throne. "She's making her move," Julian Reed, Thaddeus's longtime friend and only ally on the board, warned during a rare visit to the mansion. "There's talk of voting you out on medical incapacity grounds." Thaddeus, watching the children play in the garden through the window, merely nodded. "Let her try." "Thad, I don't think you understand. Vianne's been meeting with your largest shareholders. She's convinced half the board already that your new family situation indicates declining mental capacity." "Julian," Thaddeus said calmly, "do you remember why we founded Quantum Nexus?" The question seemed to catch Julian off guard. "To revolutionize computing, to build something meaningful, to change the world," Thaddeus corrected. "I thought that meant technology. I was wrong." He gestured to the children. "They're my legacy now." Julian followed his gaze to where Elowen was helping Fable climb the elaborate treehouse Thaddeus had commissioned. "The girl, the older twin, she reminds me of you." Thaddeus smiled faintly. "Elowen sees everything, understands more than she says, but she's still keeping me at arm's length. Can you blame her? These kids have lost everyone they've ever counted on, and now they're with a man who's—" Julian stopped abruptly. "Dying," Thaddeus finished. "You can say it, Julian. They know. I've been honest with them from the beginning. 2 weeks later, Vianne Chambers made her move. An emergency board meeting was called to discuss Thaddeus's concerning behavior and questionable judgment. The adoption had gone public, making headlines across the country, the dying billionaire and his instant family. Some outlets painted it as a heartwarming final chapter. Others suggested a publicity stunt or evidence of diminished capacity. Mr. Mercer's decision to adopt 5 children while facing terminal illness raises serious questions about his judgment, Vianne argued to the assembled board. His focus has completely shifted away from the company he founded. Quantum Nexus needs stable leadership during this transition, not sentimental distractions. Several board members nodded in agreement. Julian watched with growing concern as the room tilted in Vianne's favor. Furthermore, she continued, these impulsive decisions suggest an emotional reaction to his diagnosis rather than the calculated thinking that built this company. I move to invoke Section 7 of our charter and temporarily relieve Mr. Mercer of his duties pending a full evaluation. The boardroom doors opened unexpectedly, and Thaddeus entered, thinner than when most had seen him last, but with the same commanding presence. To everyone's surprise, Elowen walked beside him, her expression as inscrutable as her adoptive father's. Thaddeus, Vianne recovered quickly. This is a closed board meeting, and children are certainly not permitted. As the majority shareholder, I'm permitted anywhere in my company, Thaddeus replied calmly, and Elowen is here at my invitation. The 12-year-old surveyed the room with unnerving composure, her eyes lingering briefly on Vianne before moving on to each board member. In turn, you've all received the quarterly projections, Thaddeus asked, taking a seat at the head of the table and gesturing for Elowen to sit beside him. The board members exchanged glances. Yes, but that's not why Our Asia expansion has exceeded expectations by 17%, Thaddeus continued, as if there had been no interruption. The quantum encryption division has secured 3 government contracts ahead of schedule, and our stock has stabilized following the announcement of our succession plan. What succession plan? Vianne demanded, her composure slipping. Thaddeus smiled for the first time. The one I filed with the SEC this morning. He distributed tablets to each board member. You'll find everything in order. My role as Chief Innovation Officer continues until health prevents it. Julian takes over as CEO effective immediately, and the voting shares of Quantum Nexus transfer to the Mercer Family Trust upon my death. The Mercer family? You mean the children? Vianne asked incredulously. With appropriate guardianship and oversight until they come of age, Thaddeus confirmed. Elowen has been sitting in on quantum computing strategy sessions for the past month. She understands the technology better than most of our junior engineers. The young girl remained silent, but her eyes held a glint of satisfaction as Vianne struggled to respond. This is precisely the erratic behavior I was addressing, Vianne finally managed. Placing the future of a trillion-dollar company in the hands of orphans. My children, Thaddeus corrected, his voice hardening, and I'm not placing anything in their hands yet. I'm securing their inheritance and ensuring that what I've built serves them, rather than exploiting them. He fixed Vianne with a penetrating stare. Just as I ensured the quantum security algorithm you attempted to sell to our competitors last quarter remained safely within our patents. The boardroom fell silent. Vianne's face drained of color. That's absurd, she whispered, but her eyes darted to the door. Section 12, subsection B of your employment contract, Thaddeus continued conversationally. Corporate espionage results in immediate termination and prosecution. He nodded to the security team that had appeared at the doorway. Ms. Chambers, you'll be escorted to clear your office. After the board meeting, Thaddeus found himself unusually exhausted. The confrontation had drained what little energy his disease left him. In the car ride home, Elowen sat quietly beside him, watching the city pass by outside the window. "You didn't have to bring me today," she said finally. "No," Thaddeus agreed. "But I wanted to." "Because you wanted me to see what I would inherit? Or because you wanted to show me off to your board?" The question was direct, challenging, so like something Thaddeus himself might have asked, that he couldn't help smiling. "Neither," he replied honestly. "I wanted them to see who I'm fighting for now." Elowen considered this, her expression thoughtful. "Vianne didn't expect you to know about her betrayal." "No," Thaddeus admitted. "She thought I was too distracted by the adoption, by my illness." He glanced at the girl. "How did you know about the algorithm?" "I overheard you and Julian discussing security breaches last week," she said matter-of-factly, "and I saw the same name, Vianne, on papers in your office." She hesitated. "I wasn't snooping. I just noticed things." "You see everything," Thaddeus said, "just like I used to." The next few weeks brought a rhythm to their unconventional family life. Mornings began with controlled chaos, breakfast preparations, school lunches, hunting for missing shoes and homework. Afternoons filled with activities tailored to each child's interests. Evenings were for family dinners, something Thaddeus had never experienced in his own childhood, followed by reading with Fable, helping Caspian with coding projects, discussing celestial phenomena with Lyra, and watching Everett disassemble and rebuild everything from toasters to drones. Only Elowen maintained her careful distance, polite but reserved, observing more than participating. She would join family activities, but rarely initiated conversation with Thaddeus, preferring to lose herself in books or long solitary walks on the property. As his condition deteriorated, Thaddeus found himself relying more on his medical staff. A live-in nurse monitored his medications and helped manage his increasing pain. Dr. Ashford visited weekly, her expression growing more concerned with each examination. "You need to consider hospice care soon," she advised during one visit. "The cancer is spreading faster than we anticipated." Thaddeus nodded, having already accepted what was coming. How much time? "Weeks rather than months," she said gently. "The stress of recent events hasn't helped." That evening, Thaddeus found Elowen sitting alone on the cliffside terrace, staring out at the ocean. The sunset painted the water in brilliant oranges and purples, a spectacular display neither seemed to be watching. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded without looking up. Thaddeus lowered himself carefully into the adjacent chair, wincing slightly as pain shot through his abdomen. They sat in silence for several minutes before Elowen spoke. "Dr. Ashford said weeks, didn't she?" Thaddeus wasn't surprised she knew. "Yes." "Why aren't you afraid?" she asked, finally turning to look at him directly. The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think I'm not afraid?" "Because I would be," she admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing her face. "I was when my parents died. I still am sometimes." Thaddeus considered her words carefully. "I am afraid," he said honestly, "not of dying itself, but of leaving things unfinished, of leaving all of you." Another silence fell between them, more comfortable than the last. "Can I show you something?" Elowen asked, suddenly standing up. "In my room." Curious, Thaddeus followed her inside and up the stairs, moving more slowly than he once had. Elowen's room was meticulously organized, books arranged by subject matter rather than alphabetically, a desk with notebooks lined up precisely, walls covered with star charts and complex equations that would challenge university professors. She hesitated at her closet door. "I haven't shown anyone, not even Everett." Inside the closet, Elowen had created a makeshift memorial. Photos of her parents, clearly cut from larger family pictures, were arranged carefully on a small shelf. Beside them sat various objects: a woman's scarf, a man's watch, a small stack of letters bound with twine. "These were the only things I could keep," she explained quietly. "When they died, most of their belongings were sold. Foster homes don't have much storage space." Thaddeus felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with his illness. "Thank you for showing me." Elowen reached for a worn journal at the back of the shelf. "This was my mother's. She was a physicist." The revelation startled Thaddeus. "A physicist?" Elowen nodded, carefully opening the journal to reveal pages of handwritten equations and theoretical models. She was working on quantum entanglement theories before she died. Nothing much came of it. She worked at a small university, not a big lab. Thaddeus took the journal with trembling hands, scanning the equations. They were elegant, innovative, approaching quantum problems from angles he'd never considered. "These are brilliant," he murmured, genuine admiration in his voice. "Her name was Ilara Nightingale," Elowen said, watching his face carefully. "She applied for a grant from the Mercer Foundation 7 years ago for her research." The name stirred something in Thaddeus's memory. Nightingale. I remember that proposal. It was unconventional, ahead of its time. He looked up at Elowen, realization dawning. "We turned it down." "You did," she confirmed. No accusation in her voice, just statement of fact. She couldn't get funding anywhere after that. Had to take a teaching position instead of continuing her research. Thaddeus closed the journal gently. "If I had known." "You couldn't have," Elowen shrugged. "There are thousands of grant applications every year." "Is that why you've kept your distance? Because my foundation rejected your mother's work?" Elowen considered the question. "At first, maybe. When I realized who you were at Crescent Moon, I remembered her talking about the rejection, how it changed everything for her." She took the journal back, running her fingers over the cover. "But then I thought about what she would say now." What would she say?" Thaddeus asked softly. "That it's a strange universe," Elowen replied, a small smile forming. "That quantum entanglement works in mysterious ways." She looked up at him. Her research was about how particles that interact remain connected, regardless of distance or time. She believed everything was connected somehow. "Like you finding your way to me," Thaddeus said, understanding. "Like you finding us when you needed a family and we needed a home." Elowen hesitated, then added, "She would have liked you, I think, despite everything." Thaddeus felt something shift between them, a barrier dissolving. "I wish I could have met her, funded her research properly." "You still can," Elowen said. "Not her specifically, but her work. I've been continuing it." She led him to her desk, where several notebooks were filled with equations that extended her mother's theories. Despite his weakened condition, Thaddeus stayed up half the night reviewing Elowen's work, astonished by the child's grasp of quantum mechanics and her intuitive extensions of her mother's research. By morning, he had made 2 decisions. First, he would establish the Ilara Nightingale Quantum Research Division at Quantum Nexus, dedicated to pursuing the theoretical work Elowen's mother had begun. Second, he would ensure that Elowen herself would have every resource to continue her mother's legacy when she was ready. The revelation about Ilara Nightingale transformed the relationship between Thaddeus and Elowen. The careful distance she had maintained collapsed almost overnight. She began joining him in his home office, discussing quantum theories and helping organize his legacy projects. More importantly, she started sharing stories about her parents, about the siblings' life. Before the accident, memories she had previously kept locked away. As Thaddeus's condition worsened, the family adapted. The younger children, initially sheltered from the severity of his illness, gradually came to understand that their time with their new father would be brief. Fable took to leaving her one-eyed, box in Thaddeus's room to keep watch while he rested. Lyra composed songs about stars and sang them by his bedside. Caspian developed a simple communication app for days when Thaddeus was too weak to speak. Everett, mechanical mind always working, built a motorized chair to help Thaddeus move around the garden on good days. Elowen, however, took on the heaviest burden. At just 12, she became the emotional anchor for her siblings while also serving as Thaddeus's most constant companion. She read to him when his vision blurred from medication, discussed complex theories when pain kept him awake at night, and simply sat with him in silence when words became too difficult. One evening, as sunset painted the ocean in brilliant colors once again, Thaddeus sat on the terrace with all 5 children gathered around him. His strength was fading rapidly, but he had insisted on watching one more sunset together. "I need to tell you something important," he said, his voice weaker than the day before, "about what happens next." Fable climbed onto his lap, careful not to disturb the medical equipment. "After you go to the stars." Thaddeus smiled at the euphemism the youngest had adopted. "Yes, little one, after that." He explained the arrangements he had made, the trust that would provide for them, the guardianship plan that would keep them together, the foundation that would ensure Elara Nightingale's work continued. He told them about the educational funds established for each of them, tailored to their unique interests and abilities. He assured them that the glass mansion would remain their home for as long as they wanted it. "But those are just things," he said, looking at each child in turn. "The most important thing I'm leaving you isn't money or property." "What is it?" Caspian asked. "Family," Thaddeus answered simply. "Each other. The connections you've formed, the bond you share." He reached for Elowen's hand. "Your sister, help me understand something profound. We're all entangled, connected in ways that transcend physical presence. Even when I'm gone, that connection remains." Elowen squeezed his hand, tears tracking silently down her face. "You came into my life when I thought it was ending," Thaddeus continued, his voice growing fainter. "Instead, you showed me it was. Just beginning in a different form. My legacy isn't Quantum Nexus, it's you, all of you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final golden rays across the water, the 5 Nightingale siblings, now the Mercer family, sat with the father they'd known for less than a year, but who had changed their lives forever. In that moment, none of them were thinking about the billions they would inherit or the company that would someday be theirs. They were simply present, connected, entangled in the quantum fabric of family that Thaddeus had helped weave in his final days. 3 days later, Thaddeus Mercer passed away peacefully in his sleep, Elowen reading from her mother's journal beside him and Fable's one-eyed fox keeping watch from the pillow. The funeral was small and private, attended only by the children, Julian, Zephyr, Dr. Ashford, and Wren Calloway. In accordance with Thaddeus's wishes, there were no corporate representatives, no business associates, no press. Elowen, standing strong for her siblings, placed her mother's journal in the casket before it was closed. "So you can continue her work on the other side," she whispered. 1 year later, the Mercer Foundation announced the breakthrough of the Nightingale quantum entanglement theory, based on the work of Elara Nightingale and extended by her daughter Elowen Mercer. The theory revolutionized quantum computing and led to advancements that Thaddeus himself had sought for decades. When interviewed about the discovery, 12-year-old Elowen, now 13, simply said, "Everything is connected. Everyone leaves. An imprint on the universe that never truly disappears. My mother taught me that. My father helped me prove it." In the glass mansion on the cliff, now warmed by the laughter and life of 5 children, Elara Nightingale's equations had found their way home through the most unexpected quantum entanglement of all: a dying billionaire and 5 abandoned children, connected across time and circumstance by the invisible threads of the universe. The morning routine at the Mercer mansion had evolved into a carefully orchestrated chaos that somehow worked. Zephyr, who had transitioned from executive assistant to household manager with surprising adaptability, moved through the kitchen, preparing 5 different breakfasts while checking schedules on her tablet. 6 months into their new family arrangement, she had memorized each child's preferences and peculiarities. Caspian wouldn't eat if his food touched. Lyra required everything in groups of 3. Fable would only use the fox-shaped cup. Everett needed protein first thing, or he'd crash by mid-morning, and Eloan silently preferred her tea steeped exactly 4 minutes. No more. "Morning status?" Thaddeus asked, entering the kitchen with careful steps. The experimental treatment he'd resumed at Eloan's insistence had slowed the cancer's progression, but left him weakened and nauseated most mornings. Caspian's finishing a coding project due today. He was up until midnight despite the rules. Lyra can't find her Constellation notebook. Everett disassembled the upstairs thermostat. Again. Zephyr handed him a ginger tea that helped with the nausea. Fable's still asleep, and Eloan's been in your study since dawn. Thaddeus raised an eyebrow. "My study?" "Said she needed to review something before school," Zephyr replied, expertly flipping pancakes while typing a reminder into her tablet. The tutor for Lyra arrives at 4. Caspian's robotics competition is at 5:30, and Dr. Ashford rescheduled for tomorrow. Thanking her with a nod, Thaddeus made his way to his study, where he found Eloan surrounded by financial documents. Her brow furrowed in concentration. "Early morning corporate espionage?" he asked lightly. She looked up, unembarrassed at being caught. "The Nightingale Trust documents. I wanted to understand how you've structured our future." At 12, Eloan approached everything with an intensity that sometimes unnerved the adults around her. Since their breakthrough conversation about her mother's quantum research, she had become less guarded with Thaddeus, but more focused on understanding the empire she and her siblings would someday inherit. "Most children your age aren't concerned with trust structures," Thaddeus observed, lowering himself into his chair. "Most children my age haven't inherited a technology empire," she countered. "You haven't inherited anything yet," he reminded her gently. Eloan's eyes flickered to the medical port visible beneath his shirt collar. "But I will." The words contained no greed, only pragmatic acceptance of reality. "And when that happens, I need to protect the others." Thaddeus studied her, this child forced to mature too quickly by circumstance and responsibility. "The trust is designed to protect all of you, with multiple layers of oversight until you're adults. I know. I read the provisions." She gestured to the documents. "Julian as primary guardian, Zephyr as household trustee, a 3-person corporate board to manage Quantum Nexus until we're of age." She hesitated. "It's thorough." "But," Thaddeus prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation. "But people change when money's involved." Her eyes held an old wisdom. "I've seen it before in foster care. The ones who seemed kindest sometimes just wanted the state's stipend." The observation struck Thaddeus silent. He sometimes forgot what these children had endured before coming to him. "Julian would never betray your trust," he said finally. "Neither would Zephyr." "Maybe not intentionally," Eloan conceded, "but Vianne seemed trustworthy once too. Didn't she?" The question was incisive. Vianne Chambers, his former COO, had been his protégé before attempting to seize control of Quantum Nexus during his illness. Her betrayal had been exposed just in time, but the experience had clearly left an impression on Eloan. "What would make you feel secure?" Thaddeus asked, genuinely curious about her answer. Knowledge, she replied immediately. I need to understand everything, how the company works, how the money flows, who controls what decisions. She straightened the stack of papers. I need to be ready. Ready to take over? Ready to protect us, she corrected. When you're gone, people will try to take advantage. I'm the oldest. It's my responsibility. Thaddeus felt a complex emotion rise in his chest. Pride mingled with sadness that this child felt such weight on her shoulders. It's my responsibility to ensure that doesn't happen, he said. But I understand your concern. He made a decision. Starting tomorrow, you'll join me for 2 hours after school each day. We'll go through everything you need to know. Ellowen's eyes widened slightly, the closest she typically came to showing surprise. Everything? Everything appropriate for your age, he qualified. Financial structures, basic corporate governance, the technology patents that form the core of quantum. Nexus, he smiled faintly. Consider it an extended inheritance orientation. For the first time that morning, Ellowen's serious expression softened into something approaching excitement. Can we start with the quantum encryption protocols? I've been reading about them and have some questions about the implementation. Thaddeus laughed, despite the pain in his chest. We'll start wherever you like. Their conversation was interrupted by a small voice from the doorway. Daddy, are you having a meeting? Fable stood there in mismatched pajamas, her one-eyed fox clutched against her chest and her dark hair tangled from sleep. At 5, she was the only one of the Nightingale children who had immediately and unreservedly adopted the parental title. For Thaddeus, not a meeting, little one, just talking with your sister. About boring grown-up stuff, Ellowen added, her tone softening as it always did with her youngest sibling. Don't you have school today? Fable nodded solemnly, but Fox says my tummy hurts. Thaddeus and Ellowen exchanged a glance. Fable's stomach aches had become more frequent lately, always on days when Thaddeus had medical appointments or seemed particularly unwell. Does it hurt like last time? Thaddeus asked gently. Fable nodded, clutching her fox tighter. Come here, he said, opening his arms. She climbed onto his lap, careful of the places she knew were tender. Thaddeus held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Fox is worried, she whispered against his shoulder. About what? That you'll go away like our first mom and dad. The simple statement pierced Thaddeus more painfully than any cancer. He met Ellowen's eyes over Fable's head, seeing his own helplessness reflected there. Everyone goes away sometime, he said carefully, but that doesn't mean we ever stop loving each other. But if you go to the stars, who will read my bedtime stories? Ellowen will, he answered, or Everett, or Caspian, or Lyra. And I'll make sure to read extra stories now so you have them saved up. Fable considered this logic. Can you come to school today? For show and tell. Thaddeus had a board meeting scheduled, followed by a treatment session. You know what? I think I can. Ellowen raised an eyebrow. The quarterly board review can be handled by Julian, Thaddeus decided. Show and tell is clearly the priority today. Fable beamed, her stomachache miraculously cured, while Ellowen gathered the financial documents with a small smile. I'll tell Zephyr to reschedule. Your day, she said, sounding remarkably like an assistant rather than a child, and I'll help Fable get ready for school. As the girls left hand in hand, Thaddeus leaned back in his chair, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. The cancer was advancing despite the treatments. Every day required careful allocation of his dwindling energy, prioritizing what mattered most in the time he had left. Today, that meant show and tell at a kindergarten instead of $1 trillion. Company review. The old Thaddeus would have been appalled. The new one couldn't imagine choosing differently. The elementary school classroom buzzed with energy as 20 kindergartners took turns presenting treasured objects. Thaddeus sat in a child-sized chair at the back of the room, trying to ignore the whispers and stares from both children and parents. His presence, the reclusive tech billionaire at a school show and tell, had caused quite a stir despite his attempts to remain inconspicuous. Fable stood at the front of the class, surprisingly confident for a child who had spent her early years in the foster system. "This is my fox," she announced, holding up the worn, stuffed animal. "He only has one eye because his other one got lost during our adventures. But Daddy says that makes him special." She turned to look at Thaddeus. "And this is my daddy. He's special too." The simple introduction caught Thaddeus off guard. He had assumed he was there for moral support, not as the show-and-tell subject. "Mr. Mercer, would you like to come up and say hello to the class?" Fable's teacher invited, her expression a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Thaddeus made his way to the front, acutely aware of his physical frailty as he navigated between tiny desks. Fable beamed up at him, clearly thrilled with the attention her presentation was receiving. "Hello," he began, unsure what to say to a room full of 5-year-olds. "I'm Fable's father." A small boy in the front row raised his hand. "Are you really a billionaire?" "Jacob," the teacher admonished, "that's not an appropriate question." But Thaddeus smiled. "I have been fortunate in business," he answered, diplomatically, "but my greatest fortune is having Fable and her brothers and sisters in my life." "Udam," another child raised her hand. "My mommy says you're dying. Is that true?" Uncomfortable hush fell over the classroom. The teacher looked mortified, but Thaddeus merely crouched down to be at eye level with the children, ignoring the pain the movement caused. "Everyone's life journey is different," he said carefully. "Mine might be shorter than some, but that just means I need to fill it with more important things while I'm here." He glanced at Fable, who was watching him with solemn eyes, like coming to show and tell with my daughter. After the presentation, Thaddeus walked Fable to her classroom door. "Thank you for coming," she said, hugging him tightly. "Fox says you're the best show and tell ever." "Tell Fox he's pretty impressive himself," Thaddeus replied, kissing the top of her head. "I'll see you at home later." As he made his way back to the car where his driver waited, Thaddeus noticed a woman following him. She caught up just as he reached the vehicle. "Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry to bother you." She was in her 30s, with a kind face and practical clothing. "I'm Morgan Reeves, the school counselor. Do you have a moment?" Thaddeus nodded, though standing was becoming increasingly difficult. "I wanted to thank you for how you handled that situation in class," she said. "Children can be startlingly direct about difficult topics." "They were just curious," Thaddeus replied. "I prefer directness. Actually, I was hoping I might schedule some time with you and your children. Transitions like they're experiencing, new family, new school, and preparing for," she hesitated, "future changes. It can be a lot to process." Thaddeus had considered counseling but hadn't pursued it, partly from his own discomfort with the idea and partly from the children's resistance when he'd suggested it. "I'm not sure they're ready for formal counseling," he said. Morgan smiled sympathetically. "Children rarely think they're ready to talk about hard things, but they're already processing them, whether we help them or not." She handed him a card. "Just something to consider. I specialize in grief and transition support for young children." Thaddeus took the card, thanking her before easing himself into the car. As they drove away, he stared at the counselor's contact information, turning it over in his fingers. The children were adapting remarkably well on the surface, but he wasn't naive enough to believe they weren't struggling beneath that adaptation, especially Eloan, carrying the weight of the future for all of them. The Quantum Nexus headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, its twisted glass structure mimicking the double helix of DNA. a nod to the organic computational interface that had made Thaddeus's early fortune. As his driver pulled up to the private entrance, Thaddeus steeled himself. He hadn't planned to come to the office today, but Fable's school was nearby, and there were matters he needed to address in person. The executive floor fell silent as he stepped off the elevator. Employees who hadn't seen him in months stared openly, some failing to hide their shock at his appearance. The cancer and treatments had transformed him. His once commanding physical presence now gaunt, his movements measured and careful. Julian met him at the boardroom door, concern evident in his expression. "I thought you were taking the day off." "Change of plans," Thaddeus replied. "Is Holland here?" "In his office." "Thad, you should have called." "Would you have approved my visit?" Julian's hesitation was answer enough. "Your health is my concern," Thaddeus finished. "I need to speak with Holland, then I'll leave." Dr. Wesley Holland, head of Quantum Nexus's medical division, looked up in surprise as Thaddeus entered his office unannounced. "Mr. Mercer, I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly," Thaddeus observed, noting the research materials hastily being covered. On Holland's desk, "I'm interested in the progress of Project Continuance." Holland's discomfort was immediate and visible. "Sir, as I've reported to the board, we're still in early theoretical stages, years from any practical application. I've reviewed the latest updates," Thaddeus said, easing himself into a chair uninvited. "They don't align with the research parameters I established." Project Continuance had been Thaddeus's final major initiative before his diagnosis, an ambitious effort to merge quantum computing with bioneural networks. The potential applications ranged from medical breakthroughs to artificial intelligence advancements, but the core vision had been distinctly Thaddeus's, inspired by his own mother's early onset Alzheimer's disease. He had envisioned a way to preserve human consciousness, to store memories and personality patterns when the physical brain was failing. His diagnosis had given the project new personal significance. "We've had to make adjustments based on practical limitations," Holland explained nervously. "The neural mapping technology simply isn't advanced enough yet for your original vision." "It isn't advanced enough because you diverted resources to pharmaceutical applications," Thaddeus countered. "Applications with more immediate profit potential." Holland shifted uncomfortably. "The board approved the direction change. With your condition, they felt that I wouldn't notice or wouldn't care." Thaddeus leaned forward. "Project Continuance wasn't just another corporate initiative, Doctor. It matters. Sir, with all respect, even if we maintained the original direction, the technology would be decades from helping someone in your situation." Thaddeus smiled faintly. "You think I'm here because I'm afraid of dying? Looking for some technological salvation?" Holland didn't answer, but his expression suggested the thought had crossed his mind. "I made peace with my prognosis months ago," Thaddeus continued. "This isn't about prolonging my life. It's about the potential to preserve what makes us human, our memories, experiences, the patterns of thought that define us. For everyone, not just myself." He struggled to his feet, the conversation having drained his limited energy. "I want the original research direction restored, immediately. That would require board approval, which you'll have by end of day," Thaddeus cut in. "Project Continuance proceeds as originally designed, or its entire budget transfers to the Nightingale Quantum Research Division. Your choice." As he left Holland's office, Thaddeus found Julian waiting for him, concern etched into his features. "You shouldn't be exerting yourself like this," his friend admonished, walking beside him toward the elevator. "Some things require personal attention," Thaddeus replied. "Holland has been systematically dismantling Project Continuance since I stepped back from daily operations." Julian sighed. The board feels the original concept was too abstract, too far from marketable applications. The board lacks vision, Thaddeus countered, his breathing becoming labored as they walked. They always have. It's why they needed me. The elevator doors opened, revealing Vianne Chambers. Her expression registered shocked displeasure before she could compose herself. "Thaddeus," she acknowledged stiffly, "I'm surprised to see you here." After her attempted corporate coup had been exposed, Vianne had narrowly avoided criminal charges in exchange for her resignation. Her subsequent lawsuit claiming wrongful termination had been quietly settled, but her ambitions hadn't diminished. She had quickly secured a position with Helix Dynamics, Quantum Nexus's primary competitor. "Vianne," Thaddeus replied coolly, "security clearance revoked means you shouldn't be on this floor. I'm here for a partnership meeting with the new COO," she explained, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "Ironic, isn't it? Your company now seeks alliances with the competition." Julian stepped between them. "The meeting's been rescheduled, Miss Chambers. I'll have security escort you out." As Vianne was led away, her parting glance at Thaddeus held unmistakable malice. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Julian sighed heavily. "She's still causing problems. Helix has been aggressively recruiting our top talent, and somehow they seem to know exactly who to target." "She has inside information," Thaddeus observed. "Always did. The question is, who's still feeding it to her?" By the time the car pulled up to the Mercer mansion that afternoon, Thaddeus was exhausted beyond measure. The day's exertions had depleted his already limited reserves. His driver helped him inside, where he found Lyra waiting anxiously in the foyer. "You missed it," she exclaimed, bouncing with 7-year-old energy. "I finished my solar system song. I've been waiting hours to sing it for you." Despite his exhaustion, Thaddeus smiled. "Then I definitely need to hear it right away." Zephyr appeared from the direction of the kitchen, her expression shifting to concern when she saw his condition. "Lyra, perhaps your song could wait until after your father has rested." "It's fine," Thaddeus assured her, lowering himself carefully onto the foyer bench. "Music is exactly what I need right now." Lyra beamed, launching into an enthusiastic if somewhat pitchy song about the planets, complete with hand gestures representing each celestial body. Thaddeus watched her performance with genuine delight, the corporate tensions of the day receding in the face of such uncomplicated joy. When she finished with a dramatic bow, he applauded sincerely. "Spectacular. NASA should hire you immediately." "Really? Can they?" Her eyes widened with possibility. "Perhaps when you're a bit older," he suggested. "For now, I believe you have a science assignment to finish." With a theatrical sigh that suggested this was a frequent reminder, Lyra bounded up the stairs, her mission accomplished. "You shouldn't have gone to the office," Zephyr admonished once they were alone. "Dr. Ashford was very clear about conserving your energy." "Some situations required handling in person," Thaddeus replied, making no move to get up from the bench. The truth was, he wasn't sure he could without assistance. "Where are the others? Caspian and Everett are at Robotics Club. Fable is napping. And Elawan." She hesitated. "Elawan received some kind of news at school today. She came home upset and went straight to her room." Alarm cut through Thaddeus's fatigue. What happened? She wouldn't say, just asked to be left alone. With effort, Thaddeus pushed himself to his feet. "I'll check on her." "You need to rest," Zephyr insisted. "I need to be her father," he countered simply. Elawan's bedroom door was closed, no sound coming from within. Thaddeus knocked gently. "I said I want to be alone," came the muffled response. "It's me," Thaddeus replied. "May I come in?" A pause, then footsteps. The door opened to reveal Elawan, her usual composure visibly fractured. Her eyes were red-rimmed, though Thaddeus suspected she would deny crying. "What's wrong?" he asked directly, knowing she preferred straightforwardness. Elowen returned to her desk, where papers were scattered uncharacteristically haphazardly. The science fair projects were assigned today. Partners, topics. She pushed a form toward him. I got quantum entanglement. Thaddeus reviewed the assignment sheet, not understanding her distress. That's perfect for you. With your mother's research, they've paired me with Delaney Winters, Elowen interrupted, her voice tight. Vianne Chambers' daughter. Understanding dawned. Vianne's animosity toward Thaddeus had apparently extended to her daughter, creating an impossible situation for Elowen. She told everyone her mother says you stole company secrets. Elowen continued, anger breaking through her usual reserve. That you're not really sick, just hiding from legal consequences. That we're not really your children, just a publicity stunt. The cruelty of using children as weapons in adult conflicts struck Thaddeus like a physical blow. I'm sorry you had to hear those things. I don't care what she says about me, Elowen insisted, though her expression suggested otherwise. But she shouldn't say those things about you or about the others. Fable was there. She didn't understand everything, but she was upset. Thaddeus made a mental note to speak with Fable, to make sure she wasn't carrying worries she couldn't process. We can request a different partner for you. That's not the point, Elowen said, frustration evident. Changing partners won't fix the real problem. She looked up at him, her expression suddenly vulnerable. What will happen to us when you're gone? Not the money or the company, us. Me and Everett and Caspian and Lyra and Fable. If people like Vianne are already saying these things now, what will they say then? The question pierced to the heart of Thaddeus's deepest fears. The legal arrangements were meticulous, the financial provisions more than adequate. But he couldn't protect them from cruelty, from gossip, from the inevitable questions about their unconventional family formation. Come with me, he said after a moment of thought. There's something I need to show you. Despite her upset, Elowen followed him dutifully to his study. Thaddeus unlocked a hidden panel in the wall safe, revealing a smaller compartment containing a sleek metallic object about the size of a paperback book. This is a quantum neural interface prototype, he explained, removing it carefully. The only functional model from Project Continuance. Elowen's scientific curiosity immediately engaged, despite her emotional state. A physical quantum computer, but the cooling requirements solved using a superconducting material my team developed last year, Thaddeus said with a hint of pride. This device can store and process neural patterns in a quantum state, thoughts, memories, personality, or markers. He activated the device, which illuminated with a subtle blue glow. I've been recording daily, my memories, thoughts about each of you, advice I would give in various situations. It's not consciousness transfer. That technology is decades away, if ever possible, but it is a legacy more personal than legal documents or video recordings. Elowen took the device with reverent hands, her scientific mind clearly racing to understand its implications. So when we need you, I won't be here physically, Thaddeus acknowledged, but something of me will be accessible to you. My thoughts on the company's future, on handling difficult people like Vianne, on raising your siblings. He smiled, faintly. Even my terrible dad jokes, I'm afraid. For the first time that day, the tension in Elowen's shoulders relaxed slightly. Does anyone else know about this? Just Julian, and now you. Why show me? Why not all of us? Thaddeus considered how to frame his answer. The others are younger. Their understanding of death is different, less concrete. For Fable, telling me she'll see me in her dreams is comfort enough. But you... He looked at her directly. You need more tangible reassurances. Evidence that what we've started together won't end completely. Elowen's scientific skepticism warred visibly with her emotional need. It's not really you, though, just recordings. No, it's not me, Thaddeus agreed. Nothing can replace physical presence, but it's something, a bridge between what is and what will be. She nodded slowly, returning the device to his hands. Does it have quantum encryption? The question, so practical amidst the emotional weight of their conversation, made Thaddeus smile. Triple layered. Only you and your siblings will ever have access. Good, she said simply. Then, after a moment, I still don't want to partner. With Delaney Winters, I'll speak with your teacher, Thaddeus promised. And more importantly, I'll ensure that Vianne understands there are boundaries she should not cross. That evening, after the younger children were in bed, Thaddeus made a phone call from his study. Vianne answered on the third ring, her voice wary. Calling to concede at last, Thaddeus. Your health must be worse than rumored. My health is precisely as rumored, he replied calmly. I'm calling about your daughter, Delaney. A pause. What about her? She's repeating things in school. Things that are causing distress to my children, particularly my youngest daughter. Vianne's laugh held no humor. Children repeat what they hear. Perhaps you should worry less about my parenting and more about the orphans you've collected for your legacy project. Thaddeus let the provocation pass. I understand your animosity toward me, Vianne. Business is business, but children should be kept out of adult conflicts. How noble you sound, she replied sarcastically. The great Thaddeus Mercer, suddenly concerned with moral boundaries now that he's dying. Where was this ethical consideration when you built your empire? When you stepped on countless careers, mine included? I never claimed perfection, Thaddeus acknowledged. But I am asking, person to person, parent to parent, leave the children out of this. Her voice hardened. Or what? You'll sue me again? Call my employer? Your threats mean nothing now, Thaddeus. We both know you're running, out of time. The truth of the statement couldn't be denied. If not for my sake, then for theirs. Children deserve better than to be weapons in adult battles. A long silence followed. When Vianne spoke again, something in her tone had shifted. I'll speak with Delaney about appropriate school behavior. But don't mistake this for reconciliation. Thaddeus, you destroyed my career. That doesn't disappear because you found religion in your final days. The call ended abruptly. Thaddeus set down the phone, unsure if he'd made any progress, but having tried his best diplomatic approach. If that failed, there were other levers he could pull, though he hoped for the children's sake it wouldn't come to that. As he prepared for bed that night, fighting through the growing pain that even medication couldn't fully address, Thaddeus found himself reflecting on Vianne's words. Had he truly found religion in his final days? Was his concern for the children's emotional well-being merely a deathbed conversion to values he'd ignored throughout his life? The questions lingered as he drifted into unsettled sleep, dreams mixing memories of his ruthless business ascent with tender moments reading to fable or discussing quantum theory with Elowen. In one particularly vivid dream, his mother, lost to Alzheimer's decades earlier, sat beside him, her face clear of the confusion that had marked her final years. You always did things in your own time, Thaddeus, she said, her voice exactly as he remembered from childhood, even goodness. He woke before dawn, the dream clinging to his consciousness. Outside his window, the first hint of sunrise painted the horizon in gentle pinks and purples. On impulse, he wrapped himself in a robe and made his way carefully to the terrace overlooking the ocean. To his surprise, he found Everett already there, tinkering with what appeared to be a small drone by the light of a headlamp strapped to his forehead. Couldn't sleep? Thaddeus asked, settling into a chair beside him. Everett jumped slightly, then relaxed when he saw who it was. Had an idea for the stabilization mechanism. Needed to try it before school. Of all the children, Everett was perhaps the least demonstrative with his emotions, expressing himself primarily through his endless mechanical projects. While his twin sister processed feelings through analysis and understanding, Everett processed through building and fixing. "What are you making?" Thaddeus asked, genuinely interested. "Surveillance drone," Everett replied matter-of-factly. "For security. The existing system has blind spots on the north side of the property." Thaddeus raised an eyebrow. "You've analyzed our security system?" Everett nodded without looking up from his work. "Someone needs to make sure we're safe." The statement contained layers of meaning Thaddeus suspected the boy himself didn't fully recognize. "Is that something you worry about, being safe?" A shrug. "Ilawan worries about money and legal stuff. I worry about practical things, physical safety, how systems work." His hands continued their delicate adjustments to the drone's wiring. "If I understand how things work, I can fix them when they break." Not for the first time, Thaddeus was struck by how each child had developed their own coping mechanism for past trauma and future uncertainty. Ilawan through knowledge and control, Everett through mechanical mastery, Caspian through technology, Lyra through creativity, and Fable through imagination. "Some things can't be fixed with tools," Thaddeus said gently. Everett's hands stilled, momentarily. "I know that." He looked up finally, his expression serious beyond his years. "But some things can be made better, even if they can't be completely fixed." As the sunrise intensified, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Thaddeus sat in companionable silence with this quietly determined child who approached the world's problems with wrenches and circuits. There was wisdom in that approach, he realized, focusing on what could be improved rather than lamenting what couldn't be changed. "The drone looks good," he said finally. "But maybe we should discuss the security implications with Julian before deploying it?" Everett nodded, the practical suggestion appealing to his methodical nature. "I'll make a presentation with the technical specifications and proposed flight patterns." "Perfect," Thaddeus agreed, hiding his amusement at the boy's seriousness. "And Everett, thank you for looking out for everyone." The boy ducked his head, uncomfortable with the direct appreciation, but clearly pleased. "It's just engineering," he mumbled. "Anyone could do it." "But not everyone would think to," Thaddeus pointed out. "That's what makes you special." As the household began to stir with morning routines, Thaddeus remained on the terrace a moment longer, watching the ocean waves and reflecting on his conversation with Everett. Each child was processing the uncertainty of their future in their own way, some more openly than others, but all of them carrying the weight of impending loss. The school counselor's card remained in his desk drawer. Perhaps it was time to reconsider that conversation, to ensure the children had support structures that would outlast his physical presence. The quantum neural interface was a technological bridge, but they would need human connections too, people who understood their unique situation and could guide them through the grief that was coming. With renewed determination, Thaddeus made his way inside to join the morning chaos of his unexpected, precious family. Time was limited, but that only made each moment more valuable. There was still so much to teach them, so many memories to create, so much love to express while he could. The world of high-tech billionaires and corporate power plays seemed increasingly distant from what truly mattered. These 5 children who had transformed his final chapter from an ending into a beginning. The ocean air carried a bracing chill. As autumn deepened along the coast, Thaddeus sat bundled in blankets on the terrace, watching his children play on the beach below. In the 3 weeks since his confrontation with Vian, his physical decline had accelerated dramatically. The experimental treatments had been discontinued, not improving his condition and only sapping his remaining strength. Now, each day, was measured not by business accomplishments, but by moments of connection, by memories carefully crafted for the children to carry forward. Dr. Ashford had moved into the guest house, monitoring his condition around the clock. The unspoken reality hung in the air. Days remained, not weeks. "You should be resting," Julian said, emerging from the house with 2 steaming mugs. "I am resting," Thaddeus replied, accepting the tea gratefully. "This is exactly where I need to be." Below, Caspian and Lyra were constructing an elaborate sandcastle, while Fable decorated it with shells. Everett had built some kind of water-powered mechanism to fill the moat, and Elowen supervised the entire operation with her characteristic attention to detail. "They work well together," Julian observed, taking the seat beside Thaddeus. "They've had practice," Thaddeus said quietly. "Surviving the foster system, losing their parents, they learned to rely on each other." Julian nodded, watching the scene thoughtfully. "The trust documents are finalized. Everything's in place legally." "And the board? Accepting the inevitable, finally. Your successor has been approved. Unanimously." Thaddeus smiled faintly. "They fought it for months. A 29-year-old research director isn't the conventional choice for CEO," Julian pointed out, "but Arya Jang has your vision. She'll protect Project Continuance and the Nightingale Division. And she'll answer to you until the children come of age," Thaddeus added. "I need someone I trust completely in that position, Julian." His friend's eyes glistened slightly in the morning light. "I won't let you down, or them." On the beach, Fable looked up and waved enthusiastically upon noticing Thaddeus watching. He raised his hand in return, the simple gesture requiring more effort than it once had. "Have you told them?" Julian asked gently. "Not in those words," Thaddeus admitted. "But they know. Children always know more than we give them credit for." He took a labored breath. "Wren's coming tomorrow to help them prepare." Wren Calloway, who had first introduced Thaddeus to the Nightingale siblings at Crescent Moon, had remained a steady presence in their lives. The children trusted her, and she understood their history in ways few others could. "Morgan's been working with them individually," Thaddeus continued, referring to the school counselor who had eventually become a vital support for the family. "Elowen was resistant at first, but she's engaging now. Seems to appreciate having a space to ask questions she doesn't want to ask me directly." Julian nodded, understanding. Some burdens were too heavy for a child to share with the parent they were about to lose. "There is one thing still troubling me," Thaddeus said after a moment. "Project Continuance. Holland is complying with the directive to restore the original research focus, but I'm not confident it will continue once I'm gone. The board has committed. The board will do what's financially expedient," Thaddeus interrupted. "You and I both know that, and the neural interface prototype is too valuable to leave vulnerable." Julian frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "I've had Zephyr make arrangements. The research and all functional prototypes will transfer to the Nightingale Division effective immediately. Arya has already approved it. Holland will fight this." "Holland can certainly try," Thaddeus replied with a ghost of his former corporate ruthlessness. "But the patents are mine personally, not quantum nexuses. I'm free to reassign them as I see fit." Below on the beach, the children had completed their sandcastle, an elaborate structure with multiple towers and a functioning drawbridge of Everett's design. They stood back, admiring their work as the tide began to approach. "Should we tell them to move it higher on the beach?" Julian asked, seeing the inevitable. Thaddeus shook his head. "Let them enjoy it while it lasts. Some things aren't meant to be permanent. Their value is in the creating, not the keeping." The following day brought unseasonable warmth, a last breath of summer before winter's approach. Thaddeus had requested that all 5 children gather in the garden after school, the Japanese-inspired space that had become a favorite retreat during his illness. He sat waiting on a stone bench beside the koi pond, gathering his strength for what needed to be said. They arrived together, still in school clothes, expressions varying from Fable's excitement to Elowyn's wariness. They sensed the gravity of the moment, even without being told. "Come sit with me," Thaddeus invited, patting the spaces beside him. Fable immediately climbed onto his lap, while the others arranged themselves around the bench. Elowyn remained standing, arms crossed, protectively across her chest. "I wanted to talk with you all about something important," Thaddeus began, his voice weaker than he would have liked, "about what happens next." "You're going to the stars soon," Fable said matter-of-factly, using the euphemism she had adopted from one of her storybooks. Thaddeus nodded, meeting each child's eyes in turn. "Yes, little one, sooner than we hoped." Lyra's eyes filled with tears, though she tried to hide them. Caspian stared at the ground, while Everett's hands fidgeted restlessly, seeking something to fix or build. "I wanted you to know that everything is prepared," Thaddeus continued. "You'll stay here in this house all together. Julian and Zephyr will take care of you, along with Dr. Ashford and Wren." "We know the arrangements," Elowyn said, her voice carefully controlled. "We've discussed the trust structure." "This isn't about legal arrangements," Thaddeus said, gently. "This is about family, about making sure you understand how much you've changed my life." He reached for the small box beside him on the bench, removing 5 identical pendants on slender chains. Each contained a small quantum processor, a miniaturized version of the neural interface technology. "These are connected to the device I showed Elowyn," he explained, handing one to each child. "They contain memories, advice, messages, things I want to share with each of you as you grow. They're linked to your unique biometric signatures. Only you can access your messages." Fable examined hers with wonder. "So we can still talk to you after you go to the stars?" "In a way," Thaddeus qualified. "You can hear messages I've recorded for important moments in your lives. Birthdays, graduations, times when you might need guidance." "It's not the same," Everett said quietly, turning the pendant over in his hands. "No," Thaddeus agreed. "It's not the same as having me here. Nothing could be, but it's something of me that remains with you." Caspian looked up, his technological mind engaged despite his emotion. "How do they work? How do they know when to activate?" "Some messages are triggered by dates I've programmed," Thaddeus explained. "Others respond to voice patterns indicating specific types of questions or concerns. The quantum processor uses predictive algorithms to determine when particular guidance might be helpful." "And they're all different?" Lyra asked. "We each get our own messages?" Thaddeus nodded. "Each pendant contains specialized content for each of you, though some core memories and messages are shared across all 5. Elowyn, who had remained silent during the explanation, finally stepped forward to accept her pendant. "Will it have answers about the company, about what we should do when decisions need to be made?" "It will have my perspectives," Thaddeus clarified, "but the decisions will still be yours to make. That's what growing up means, learning to trust your own judgment, not just following instructions left behind." The children examined their pendants with varying degrees of wonder and skepticism. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing could replace physical presence, but it was a bridge between present and future, a tether to hold when the journey became difficult. "There's one more thing," Thaddeus said, growing tired but determined to finish what he'd planned. "Something important about your mother." All 5 children looked up at that, their attention sharply focused. Despite the months together, Thaddeus had rarely spoken directly about Ilara Nightingale, sensitive to the children's grief and protective of their memories. "When Elowyn showed me your mother's research journal, I recognized immediately what a brilliant mind she had," he continued. What I didn't fully appreciate until recently was how her work laid the foundation for much of what we've accomplished. At Quantum Nexus, Elowen's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? I had my research team review her equations, her approach to quantum entanglement. They discovered her theories anticipated several breakthroughs we later achieved through different methods that might have been more efficient had we followed her original path. Thaddeus gestured toward the house. In my study, there's a document prepared for when you're older, a formal acknowledgement of Elara Nightingale's contributions to quantum computing theory, and a retroactive research grant in her name credited to her academic institution. You're giving her credit now? Elowen asked, something complicated in her expression. After all this time? It's long overdue, Thaddeus acknowledged, and it comes with something else. The Nightingale Quantum Research Division isn't just named in her honor. Its founding charter establishes that her children will have permanent oversight of its direction and funding. The significance of this wasn't lost on Elowen, whose scientific mind had already grasped the division's importance to Quantum Nexus's future. We'll control our mother's legacy directly. As it should be, Thaddeus confirmed. Her work lives on through you, all of you, in different ways. Everett's mechanical intuition, Caspian's computational thinking, Lyra's creative approach to scientific questions, Fable's imaginative leaps, and your analytical brilliance, Elowen. You each carry different aspects of her genius. For the first time since the beginning of the conversation, Elowen's careful composure cracked slightly. She would have liked you, I think, despite everything. I wish I had met her, Thaddeus said sincerely, but I'm profoundly grateful to her for her greatest creation, the five of you. Exhaustion finally overtook him, and Dr. Ashford appeared at the garden entrance, signaling it was time for rest. The children seemed to understand, gathering their pendants and preparing to leave him to recover. But Fable lingered, her small hand touching his face with surprising gentleness. We won't forget you, she promised solemnly, even when you're in the stars. Thaddeus covered her hand with his own. And I'll always be watching over you, all of you. That night, as moonlight streamed through his bedroom windows, Thaddeus recorded his final messages to the quantum neural interface. His voice was weaker now, but his mind remained sharp, focused on what he needed to say to each child at various milestones in their lives, moments he would not physically witness, but could still touch through the technology he had created. For Elowen, at 18, guidance on assuming partial control of the trust. For Everett at 16, encouragement as he pursued engineering studies. For Caspian at college graduation, perspective on balancing technology and humanity. For Lyra's first scientific publication, pride in her unique approach to understanding the universe. For Fable's transition to middle school, reassurance that growing up didn't mean losing imagination. And for all of them together, on the anniversary of their adoption each year, memories of their time as a family, brief but transformative, measured not in duration, but in depth of connection. Dr. Ashford found him at dawn, the interface still glowing softly beside him, his breathing shallow but peaceful. They should say goodbye, she said quietly to Zephyr, who stood vigilant in the doorway. One by one, the children came to his bedside, Fable clutching her one-eyed fox, Lyra singing softly, Caspian silent but present, Everett struggling to accept what couldn't be fixed, and finally Elowen, composed but with tears she no longer tried to hide. Thank you, she whispered, holding his hand, for finding us, for making us a family. Thaddeus Mercer, who had built an empire of technology and innovation, whose name adorned buildings and patents and corporate headquarters, found that his greatest legacy stood surrounding his bed, 5 children whose lives he had changed, and who had irrevocably changed his own. As morning light filled the room, he closed his eyes for the final time, secure in the knowledge that what mattered most would continue, not in quantum processors or corporate assets, but in the hearts and minds of these remarkable children, who would carry forward both their mother's scientific legacy and their father's enduring love. 6 months later, Elowen stood at the clifftop overlooking the ocean, her pendant warm against her skin. Beside her, her siblings gathered in a semicircle, each wearing their own connection to the father they had known too briefly, but whose influence had fundamentally altered their lives. "He would have liked this," Everett said, gesturing to the memorial garden they had created together, a space where quantum principles were illustrated through light and motion, science and art merging in a living tribute. "He does like it," Fable corrected, her belief in continued connection unshaken. "He's watching from the stars." Elowen smiled, her hand closing around her pendant. Inside, their father's voice waited, ready to guide them through the years ahead, not replacing the human connection they had forged, but extending it beyond physical limitation. As they stood together watching the sunset, 5 siblings bound by both birth and choice, they embodied the principle at the heart of their mother's research and their father's final understanding. That true quantum entanglement occurs not just between particles, but between lives that have touched meaningfully, remaining connected across any distance, even the ultimate one. In the glass mansion on the cliff, now truly a home filled with laughter, arguments, science experiments gone awry, and the controlled chaos of family life, Thaddeus Mercer's legacy continued, not in the technology that bore his name, but in the children who carried his love forward into a future bright with possibility. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.